This is the Gulikit King Kong 3 Max controller. Last year I had the pleasure of reviewing the Gulikit King Kong 2 Pro controller, and it was one of my favorite controllers. It's a hard act to follow. So, how do they improve upon the controller? Well, before all of that, let's talk about what comes inside the box. The box comes with the controller itself, some extra buttons, a USB-A to USB-C cable, and instructions. Inside this little nifty carrying case is the controller itself. Also inside this case is a USB dongle as well as a key switch puller, which we'll get to later. So in my hands, this feels very similar to the original King Kong controller and the King Kong 2 controller that Gulikit has made. But if you needed a more direct controller comparison, I would say this is comparable to an Xbox controller in feel. You know what, why don't we pull out our Gulikit KK2 controller? It's been collecting dust for a little bit, so pay no mind to it. But they look remarkably similar. I mean, duh, it's just the next iteration of the controller, right? I mean, of course it would be similar, right? So in terms of looks and feel, they're more or less identical. They even function fairly similarly as well. But the King Kong 3 Max has a number of additional features. As you can see here, the King Kong 2 has nothing on the back, but on the back of the King Kong 3, there are a couple of different options, like these triggers. They can be full triggers or hair triggers, and the hair triggers in here feel far more satisfying than on, say, the Xbox Elite controller. The buttons click on the triggers. Also on the back of the controller, there are 4 back buttons, very similar in style to, say, an Xbox Elite controller. I mean, this entire controller screams Xbox Elite controller. But where are the back paddles? Well, the back paddles can be found in this clear case. This clear case also comes with a set of replacement buttons. Do you not like the Nintendo layout where A and B and X and Y are all mixed up compared to, say, an Xbox layout? Well, this is your chance to swap those out. Swapping the buttons out doesn't even require opening the controller up. It just requires the use of this keycap puller. And would you believe it? The buttons are basically keyboard keycaps, but not exactly. I don't believe these are actual keyboard switches, but they definitely resemble them. Removing all the buttons is as simple as using the tool to pull each of the buttons out. As you can see here, all of the buttons are different lengths due to the curvature of the controller, so it's not as easy as just pulling them out here and rearranging them there. If you want the Xbox layout, you have to use the spare buttons in the proper positions to have the Xbox layout. Installing these new button keycaps is as simple as pulling them out of the case and putting them on the controller and pushing down firmly. Once you successfully do this, you'll basically have an Xbox layout. Do note that this operation is entirely cosmetic, meaning that these buttons don't change in functionality at all. If I had to be honest with you, I didn't really need to do this. I don't really have issues with knowing where my buttons are. It's not like I ever look down at my controller when I play games. Am I the only person that's never had an issue with the button layouts of different consoles? So yes, while I've said this greatly resembles an Xbox Elite controller, the method for attaching the back paddles is completely different. To attach back paddles to your controller, you essentially need to snap them into place. You line them up in the corresponding hole and then you push it in. It should pop into place, and you'll hear it when it pops into place. To remove it, all you have to do is pull it out. Yes, the buttons are in, yes, they click. I don't think the mechanism is as nice as on the actual Xbox Elite controllers, but it won't ever come out during gameplay, which is a good thing. So what makes this controller so compelling? The controller itself uses Hall effect sticks. The controller is more accurate and doesn't require as big of a dead zone, and you won't experience stick drift from regular use. So how does it handle during gameplay? Well, I mean, it handles great during gameplay. With regular use, you know, like just using the sticks, buttons, triggers, and everything that a normal controller would have, it works out pretty well. As a standard controller, I have zero complaints. In my own humble opinion, the only real weakness with this controller is the D-pad, which, to be fair, it's a decent D-pad, but for like 2D games, it's not in the optimal position. So yes, this controller is more for more typical 3D styled games, you know, like FPSs, action adventure games, that kind of stuff. But of course, this is the part where we talk about the other functions of this controller. Let's talk back buttons. The back buttons can only be mapped to existing buttons on your device. You also aren't able to map multiple key presses. And for those of you wanting to use this with the Steam Deck, it only registers as a regular Pro controller, so the back buttons don't even show up in Steam input. The controller also has macro functionality, though unlike some other controllers, you can't really map multiple macros. You can only have one macro set to your controller at a time. You can supposedly record a macro for up to 10 minutes. You can also have the macro play once or have the macro play repeatedly over and over again. But I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm not really too big on macros. Honestly, I prefer doing things by hand. I like the feeling of executing a difficult move with my own hands instead of using shortcuts. There's also a number of additional settings that you can find within the manual itself, none of which require any external software to use. Oh yeah, I can't forget gyro. It's supposed to be a replacement for the Nintendo Switch Pro controller after all. Overall, it's a great controller. I suppose the only real issue I have is that the little plastic case that it comes in, the controller case, the travel case I guess you could say, that unfortunately doesn't have enough room for both the controller and all of the extra bits. Not to mention, if you stick the paddles on the controller and try to put it inside there, it straight up will not fit. Personal opinion, I think if they're gonna make a travel case for this, they should have made enough room to include not just the controller and also the pliers, but also extra space for the paddles and the extra buttons. The other major caveat is that the dongle registers itself as an Xbox 360 controller. So while it has better connectivity compared to say Bluetooth, it doesn't act like a Switch Pro controller, meaning you don't have access to certain functions like say the gyro, at least like not actual gyro controls. And finally, this final one pertains more to me than it does for regular people. But I do like playing a lot of 2D games, you know, fighting games, platformers, Metroidvanias, you know, stuff like that. I like playing those types of games, and this controller really isn't suited for those games. You can play them just fine. I mean, people play 2D games with an Xbox controller all the time. This controller was meant more for your modern games of today, you know, 3D games where you move around with a left analog stick and not the D-pad. It's a great fit for first-person shooters, not so much for fighting games, but that's just me. The D-pad itself is actually okay, it's just the position of the D-pad. Anyways, yes, this controller works on Steam Deck, and yes, if you have an OLED Steam Deck, you can wake it up using this controller. If you have a Nintendo Switch or a Steam Deck and you want a controller to use, my own personal opinion, this is about as good as it gets. It's a very nice feeling facsimile of an Xbox controller that works on Switch and Steam Deck and PC. And this might become my new daily driver for controllers. If you like this video, please press the like button and check out our other videos. And if you like those other videos as well, be sure to press the subscribe button and share the good gospel of high-tech lowlife with your friends. Furthermore, we have a community Discord for enlightened individuals such as you. And if you wish to further support high-tech lowlife, be sure to check out our Patreon page. Links in the description.